Some years before she died, the actress Joyce Grenfell wrote this to her friends. If I should go before the rest of you, break not a flower, nor inscribe a stone, nor if I'm gone, speak in a Sunday voice, but be the usual friends that I have known. Weep if you must, parting is hell, but life goes on, so sing as well. I'm Greg Palmer. This leg of the trip of a lifetime is about parting and singing and life going on.
If you would, please, sign in. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you, sir.
I think we might just as well start now. Thank you for coming on this lovely day. I know it must have been difficult for many of you to take time away from your football games and your yard work to be here with us to say goodbye to our friend, our co-worker, our brother, Greg Palmer. Perhaps like me, there are some of you who didn't know the deceased personally. I myself never had the pleasure of meeting him, but I'm sure that you agree with me that those who know him seem to miss him now. The rest of us share in their loss. And speaking of loss, if I might read from The Prophet by the immortal Khalil Gibran, Greg's favorite poet and philosopher.
Staging my own funeral seemed like a good idea, although there are some people who found the concept a little creepy.
They say he was good to his family, too, some of whom are with us tonight.
I do have an historic precedent for this. Holding a trial-run funeral used to be very popular. Of course, the plague of 1348 had a lot to do with that. My plague-ridden European ancestors, especially the Spaniards, became very interested in the art of dying, what they called ars moriendi. Surrounded by horrible deaths, they sought the good death by pre-purchasing requiem masses, rehearsing deaths, and staging practice funerals. They thought such preparations would make the real thing less frightening.
Incidentally, before I forget, we do validate parking for the lot across the street, just present.
And besides, don't we all fantasize about going to our own funeral, seeing our friends and relations heartbroken, hearing our praises sung? This is definitely not working for me. And it's not because there aren't any trumpets or grieving millions either. Something else is missing. Something that should be here. Perhaps the whole affair is outdated. Maybe that's what's wrong with modern funerals. They're not modern enough. At a funeral parlor in Osaka, Japan, you can now get an up-to-the-minute, high-tech funeral. Laser, light, and fog effects that show the bereaved what the deceased is about to experience. Funerals reflect the values of their societies. In Japan, technology has become a high art. In America, we've made an art out of convenience. In some places, that's reflected in our funerals. Here at the Junior Funeral Home in Pensacola, Florida, there's a special drive-through window that lets you view the deceased without ever leaving your car.
When we first opened, it was a situation you had a couple of funeral homes here that were pretty prominent, and most people go to a funeral home for a funeral, chapel funeral, or a wake. And then other than that, they do not come. If you're not having many funerals, you do not have that many people coming by. So we thought we'd put in the drive-through window in order to have people coming for a third reason, and that's to see one. So it has basically become a tourist attraction. A lot of people will come by and say, well, we saw it on Hollywood Squares, and we'd like to see it. So
Hollywood Squares?
Yeah, it was a question on Hollywood Squares. Is there a funeral home in Pensacola that has a drive-through window? And they said no, but it was true. So they do come by to see it.
So in fact, it was almost strictly promotional at the beginning.
Strictly.
Even if a drive-through window seems crass and horribly American, at least Willie Jr. is honest about his motives. But the question remains, what do funeral rites have to have so they work for the mourners and they work for the mournee, too?
Does anyone have anything they'd like to say about their friend, Greg? Anyone? I didn't even know the guy. Nobody. Well, I guess we can wrap this up then. So thank you for coming, and good night.
Human beings are still animals, and like all animals, the only thing we really have to do when one of our species dies is get rid of the body. That sounds simple, and in some places, it should be.
In the morning, the crime lab technicians come in, and I'm going to show you the autopsy suite now. This is where I spent my entire day, and I was retrieving tiny fragments of a fragmented lead projectile.
Dr. Joy Carter is on the cutting edge of getting rid of the body, literally. She's the chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C. And this is the crematorium.
This is the crematorium. And because of the law of Washington, unclaimed bodies, unidentified bodies that are held over 30 days by law are to be cremated. We hold the bodies way over 30 days, sometimes for a couple of years if we're not sure if there's a family in the area.
Joy Carter follows government regulations, but she does even more than is required because of her compassion for the people who come to her, the dead and their families. She can't give them much, but she tries to provide a last moment of dignity.
You often wonder as you're examining perhaps a homeless person or perhaps a very elderly person that died all alone and the body's still here. Somebody somewhere knows something about the person. They might have a family somewhere. Those things really do bother you, and they're quite senseless. So those individuals, at least here, I think they're getting the last respects that we as strangers can give them.
What we have today is a middle-aged, slightly more than middle-aged, slightly obese male deceased who we understand the cause of death was a hepatic liver condition complicated by alcoholism. All right, so at this point, let's uncover the deceased.
The more I watch people getting rid of the body, the more obvious it becomes that the process is never simple.
And I would suggest let's get some water that we can use.
The way we do it has acquired profound meaning for both individuals and their societies. How it is done reflects our feelings about ourselves, each other, and death. One of the interesting ways Americans get rid of the body is to first make it look a little less like a body. It's called embalming, and though a lot of people around the world think it's a bizarre practice, 6 out of 10 Americans go into the fire or the ground embalmed. How come other cultures look at American embalming or Western embalming and say, that's weird?
Because embalming is simply a step towards the viewing process. That is, having the body out on display for someone to come up and physically have a one-on-one relationship with, look at.
Why is viewing important here?
Psychologists, grief counselors, healthcare professionals, mental health people have pretty consistently come to the conclusion that part of the grieving process can be accomplished through a physical viewing of the body, a finality, a period at the end of a sentence. This dehydration on this side of the face is going to be the viewing side. That is, the family and the friends are going to be seeing this side of the face. So that's something that post-embalming we're going to have to pay attention to make sure that we can minimize that as much as possible. Okay, Ron, if you'd like to do that for us.
Yes, I do think this person is a human being. He had some beliefs. He had some belief systems. He had a culture. You know, he spoke. You know, he communicated. He exists. And he is a human being.
We're now ready to decide what vessels we're going to use to inject and drain the body fluids from this gentleman. So, at this point, I'm going to suggest for today's purposes that we use the right common carotid and the accompanying vein that follows the right common carotid, which is the right jugular vein. Exactly. As much of the whole blood we can remove from this deceased prior to adding our preserving solution the less discoloration problems we're going to have. And we just help stimulate it somewhat with these forceps. You can see how thick, how actually coagulated the blood is. Okay, and I would suggest doing some massaging in the legs, trying to bring some of that blood towards the heart.
When we finish with someone and we've dressed them and casketed them and they look like they're sleeping, and we know that when their family comes in that they're going to not be shocked at seeing that person, it's a wonderful feeling.
The man on the table donated his body to medical science. It was apparently the last gesture of a mostly unsuccessful life. But medical science didn't want him, so he was handed over to mortuary science. Other than those few sad facts, I didn't know anything about him. I never even knew his name. That bothered me at first. I thought I should care enough about him as a human being to at least know who he was. And then an odd thing happened. After 20 minutes with him in the mortuary, he wasn't a human being anymore, at least for me, not even a dead one. He was just another object in the room, like the metal tables or the big needles, a piece of work that had to be done. We sometimes laugh at the people in our society who get rid of the bodies for us, or we accuse them of being callous and unfeeling. But we owe them a lot, and not just because they do a job most of us find repugnant. Bob Yount, Joy Carter are callous to the dead in a way. They have to be to do their jobs professionally. But because of them, we don't have to be. We can remember our dead as they lived, as people, and not as carcasses.
This is a new freezer that we have installed. The purpose of installing this is to make sure that bodies which will remain here for considerable length of time will be kept in good condition.
In West Africa, Dr. K.A. Boateng is the chief medical examiner in Kumasi, Ghana. He's gotten rid of a lot of bodies in 30 years as a forensic scientist and stored a lot, too. This is your father?
Yes.
Oh. And he is being buried on...
He'll be buried on Saturday. I was old, 105 years.
Because Ghanaian funerals are so lavish, it can take years before families have raised enough money for a proper burial. Meanwhile, most bodies are kept in Dr. Boateng's morgue, many of them frozen solid. He's here thawing out. He's thawing. Death isn't a single event, it's a process, and so is a funeral ritual. Inside his building, Dr. Boateng efficiently performs his function in that process, the first step in physically getting rid of the body. But all day long, just outside Dr. Boateng's back door, the community is beginning the emotional part of the process. They wait here as the bodies are delivered for that day's funerals. For Ghanaians, this simple delivery is in fact the start of the ritual. So they don't just send an undertaker around to pick up the body. The friends, the family, the community of the dead person all come to pray, to grieve, to rejoice, and in this particular case, to take Grandma home to her village for the last time. Community involvement seems to be very important in the entire funeral process. We don't just get rid of the body, we care a lot who does it. In a Sydney, Australia funeral home, two young women prepare Mr. Phillips for a last visit with his family.
Trousers, please. It's down.
Michelle and Linda are white ladies.
Let's make you smell a little bit better.
And the white ladies are the biggest thing to hit the Australian funeral business since the backhoe. It's a funeral home operated entirely by women, but certainly not entirely for women. A caring alternative.
Okay. One more. Put that up there, mate.
Well, I think it's mainly because it's women. They see us as more caring, perhaps, rather than the men. They can relate to us a lot better, I think, in some cases, with young children, babies. The homosexual community also, they prefer women. And some wives will ask for their husbands to be done by the women because, well, such a womaniser, why not be done by ladies and carried out by women?
First one we've had with a time, Michelle, for a long time, isn't it? Okay. Got it? Did that not? Oh, that's fine. That looks right.
Yeah. What do you think, Tony?
Mr. Phillips was not a baby, homosexual, or womanizer, just an old man whose family liked the idea that caring women in white, rather than sepulchral men in black, would handle their dad.
What part of this job best?
The mortuary.
In actually working
in the mortuary, yeah.
On Mr. Phillips, etc.
Mm.
Why?
I suppose because I'm away from everyone, I can do my own thing. I chat to them, as you know. I just feel more comfortable.
Just someone grab hold of the trousers, someone with a jacket.
Once a board secretary with a lifelong interest in dead things, Michelle has found herself as a white lady. And the grieving have found her. The belief that women are naturally more caring than men is ancient. The Greeks say, women bring you into this life and women take you out. In many cultures, women are expected to prepare the bodies and comfort the families. Above all, women are often society's designated grievers. These images by David Robinson are from European cemeteries, where there are hundreds of statues of idealized women, barefoot, pure, exquisite in face and form, grieving at the tombs of men. Photographer David Robinson tells me he's never seen a cemetery statue of an equally grieving, barefoot, naked, beautiful young man. Statues of men in cemeteries are almost portraits of the deceased, usually prosperous businessmen gazing serenely into the future. And the few real women who make it onto cemetery pedestals are almost always mothers surrounded by their adoring marble children. The barefoot virgins do not weep for them. The virgins are exclusively lying on the feet of the prosperous businessmen. And some people can't understand why the white ladies are a hit.
I know what it's like to lose someone. And then I put myself in that situation that I was once in myself. And then you can communicate with people. But unless you do that, it's just a business sitting...
Bill Groves is a funeral director not far from the white ladies. Bill's family business reflects an equally compassionate tradition, that of the community itself getting rid of the body.
Yes, I'll certainly get in touch with him. Right. Thanks a lot, Nancy. Bye.
Bill's clients are often his neighbors, who come to him as a friend who knows what to do, not an undertaker peddling coffins. And Bill's place of business reflects that sense of community. The Groves live where they work.
You know, when I die, they've only got to just wheel me down the hall and straight in next door.
We seek compassion from those in the community who get rid of the bodies, whether they're strangers with a caring tradition, like the white ladies, or friends with a caring imperative, like the Groves family. Through such involvement, the community supports the grieving, rather than leaving them to face their loss alone.
The funeral itself is a very important social ritual. Socially, it's the knot on the bow of life.
Julian Litton believes community involvement in funerals has a lasting benefit for the community too, not just the grieving. Litton is an expert on English funerals and a collector of funereal art and artifacts.
That's William Blake, and there's another one to bring down for you as well.
That's amazing.
These are the little models to show the type of thing that you could have, complete with the lining as well.
Like death masks, coffin samples, and funeral prints and photos.
There's another royal funeral. Who's the Duke of York, whoever he was.
He says that getting rid of the body has always brought the English together.
The English funeral, especially in a large village or a small town, is a great catalyst. It has been for very many centuries in England, and that maintains itself today. In exactly the same way that people remember affectionately the camaraderie that existed during the last war, when, even though your house was bombed, the person next door but one would make you a cup of hot soup and then pat you on the back with a there, there, dear. So it is in English society today with the funeral.
The funeral as a community catalyst isn't just an English phenomenon, it's worldwide. This is Asamang, an Ashanti village in central Ghana. Edmund Odiatuo Amoako was born here of royal blood. He left to seek his fortune in the army. Now, 59 years later, he has come back to be buried by his community with the honor that is his due.
He was a great soldier, many minor battles. He was a respected person in society because he was very influential.
Traditionally, the Ashanti don't have undertakers. As the community celebrates the life of Warrant Officer Amoako, so the community buries him. Ashanti funerals, especially for royalty, take place over 3 days and feature a series of events, beginning with the preparation of the body and lying in state. The Ashantis spend a lot of time and money on funerals. It seems ostentatious, and I guess it is. But funereal ostentation is an obvious, measurable way Ghanaians can show their involvement in the ritual. Fred and his family chose to spend their money on the ritual itself. But the most famous funeral money spent in Ghana goes into the ground. These fantasy coffins, created by Benjamin Sowa and his employees, are spectacular works of art at spectacular prices. But if the families feel better for buying one, and the deceased is comforted in the last days, knowing he or she will be spending eternity in a fish or a rocket ship, why not? And community support demonstrated through extravagance is hardly unique to Ghana.
And from there we go to the finest wood casket made. This is a African ribbon-grained mahogany casket with a solid bronze full glass inner casket or sealer.
Frankie Campbell's in New York City is probably the most famous funeral parlor in America. They got rid of Rudolph Valentino's body here in 1926 and a lot of other big-name bodies since. You don't come to Campbell's for a pine box with plastic handles.
You could be in this room and you could select the least expensive casket and the funeral bill could be around $4,000 with all expenses. Or you could be in this room and use our most expensive casket and you could have a funeral bill at $89,000.
And that 89 grand doesn't include the cost of the plot or the monument. Funereal ostentation is easily criticized, but like all aspects of community involvement, it serves a purpose. A death creates a hole in the fabric of society. To repair that hole, to show that life and society continue even in the face of death, the community must reassert its presence and indestructibility irrespective of the cost. Community involvement and expense are also integral parts of this Athabascan potlatch near Fairbanks, Alaska. Neil, Charlie, and his family are hosting a community farewell for Neil's son, who drowned 2 years ago. This last event of the Athabascan funeral ritual might seem odd to outsiders because these people believe the deceased should not be mentioned, so his potentially dangerous spirit won't come back to the village. Everything he owned has been given to people who were important in his life. Now his father presents expensive gifts, like guns and blankets, to all who attend the farewell, a thanks for their support, but also a way to redistribute wealth within the village.
So this goes to Jim.
There's another practical purpose to the Athabascan ritual besides redistribution of wealth. Other cultures struggle with what constitutes a proper grieving period because their traditions don't tell them. But here, there is one last song that tells the tale of the son's life. As he sings, Neil hits sticks together, hitting them away from himself to push his son's spirit back into the ground. And then the boy's life on this earth and the grieving for his death are over. No matter how much he was loved, to be allowed to live life must be a relief for the family and the community. The relief of not only knowing what you have to do, but how long you have to do it. The Chinese have known what to do and for how long for centuries. Modern efficiency hasn't changed that. A recent development in Taiwan is the united funeral. One priest, one service, but up to 10 bodies and attending families, performing their ritual tasks together. United funerals take place at government complexes like this one. There's a spiritual benefit to such group ceremonies because of geomancy, the Chinese belief in the right day and time for ritual events. United funerals allow many more families to bury their heirs when tradition says they must. After the group ritual, the cremations are individual events that occur at the compound's ovens. To save space and money, 9 out of 10 Taiwanese are cremated now. These ovens are working all the time. The grieving families have precise tasks during and after a cremation. They erect small shrines to their ancestors at the proper oven, and then they wait to perform their duties to the dead. For those ancestors not cremated, an important part of the Chinese funeral ritual is the eventual exhumation and reburial of the body. This symbolic resurrection happens in many cultures all over the world, physically moving the dead to a new earthly home and emotionally to a new spiritual home. Lin Wen Chi is an exhumation specialist, taking the bones of long-buried ancestors and carefully placing them in pots in a pattern dictated by ancient custom. Warrant Officer Amawako's wake. Here, too, ancient customs provide mourners with a social context for their grief. Edmund Amawako's family is here, his mother and widow, and they know exactly what to do. because their traditions tell them what to do. Traditions including the recitation of ancient proverbs that speak of life and death. "37-year-old Australian Shane Richardson was a trucker who always wanted to drive a big Kenworth. It never happened in life, but now, in death, it will."
I have every confidence this man who was faced with that problem that we all will have one day of his death, and he faced it bravely. He was an outgoing man. He was quick to befriend a total stranger. He was also quick to help someone, especially if he saw a truck broken down or a mate fixing a truck or anyone fixing a truck. He would go in and help.
Under the direction of Bill Groves, Shane Richardson will go to his final truck stop in the big Kenny he wanted, with his mates following behind in their own trucks. By making his funeral procession a convoy, his mourners have something to do, something familiar to them that still honors their comrade. And the whole event tells the story of Shane Richardson's life in a symbolic way. He was a trucker. In most death rituals, the community is somehow involved and has things to do. Those vary greatly among cultures and rituals, but there are some that always seem to happen. One of them is telling the tale of the life that's over, whether that's a simple eulogy or a great deal more. Telling the tale is not always easy, though. It will never be easy for Irish village undertaker Benny Martin. His son Eugene was a soldier, but to many others, Eugene was a terrorist who got what he deserved.
Captain McKierney's buried there. He was murdered in his butcher shop down the square there. Porrick McKierney, his brother, is lying there in the Republican flat beside him. His brother Sean is in the centre there, who died with my son Eugene, who lays there to the left of the graveyard, the left of the Republican flat.
Eugene Martin was a member of the Irish Republican Army, killed in a bomb explosion. Benny's grief is colored by the hatred so many people have for what Eugene represented. But Benny adjusts. He tells the tale, not of the terrorist, but of the son.
What's your best memory of Eugene?
Growing up and helping me with the funerals. He drove my hearse. The last year he was alive. He loved doing coffins. He loved coming out, doing funerals. He had a great way with people, and he was very understanding of old people.
Benny gets strength and courage from Eugene's memory, and in return, he mourns for his son as if Eugene died last week and not, in fact, 18 years ago. Because much of the world thinks Eugene Martin doesn't deserve any grief, Benny will grieve alone forever, even if it means a life of constant sorrow. It's the only sacrifice he has left to make for his son.
Sometime every day, I think about it. He was a man among boys. He was a wonderful fellow. Volunteer Eugene Martin, Corn Donavala, Moy, 1st Battalion, East Tyrone Brigade, Irish Republican Army. Killed in active service, May 13th, 1974.
In Asamang, Ghana, as an Ashanti elder recites the tale of the life, Edmund Amoako begins his last day above ground. He's been prepared, laid in state, and had a wake. Now he will be moved from brass bed to coffin. But even this simple transfer is a communal, religious, emotional ritual. At the same time, people are gathering from all over the Ashanti Kingdom for the funeral celebration. Funerals are a way the Ashanti get together and exchange news, a side benefit to community involvement that happens everywhere. Chairs have been placed around the town soccer field, a band is ready, and the Amoako family receive the guests and their money. Guests at an Ashanti funeral pay to attend and honor the deceased. Then there is singing, dancing, the presentation of gifts, and there is joy. Successful funerals must provide an opportunity for both sorrow at the death and joy at the life that preceded it. Finally, at dusk, it's called a lift, carrying the deceased down the streets where he lived to his final rest. For the family and friends of Edmund Amoako, it is an emotional journey full of anger at death itself. Right before they carried Edmund Amoako's casket through the village to his burial, a considerate family member told me I should probably disappear. "The men will be very angry," she said. "They may be looking for someone to fight." And because I stood out in that village like Moby Dick, I saw that lift from a very long way off. Afterwards, I asked a village elder why the men were mad rather than sad or joyful. Their anger seemed to be out of character with the rest of the funeral. "It is because they are very drunk," he said simply. In the funeral tradition, the family of the deceased is not allowed to eat for 3 days, but they can and do drink heavily. At the time, I thought that was a tradition they could just as well do without. In retrospect, though, I realized I've never been to the funeral of someone I cared about when I wasn't angry at the fact that they had died. Like everybody else, I repressed the anger, which made the sorrow worse and the joy difficult. As you've seen in Ashanti funerals, there are many opportunities for joy and sorrow, but there's also one moment where people are allowed to be mad. And that makes sense to me.
We here commit the body of our dear friend Shane to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust.
Shane Richardson has made his last run, and he is his last cargo.
Those truck drivers who would like to give Shane a tribute, would you please go to your trucks?
And there is a final event of sorrow and joy. A 21 air horn salute led by Shane's young son, the last thing he can do for his father besides never forget him. Kenworth trucks, bone pots, embalming, exhumation. Out of context and devoid of meaning, different cultures' funeral rituals can seem strange or even silly. For instance, at that high-tech funeral in Osaka, the laser finish represents a tradition of carrying the deceased through the streets that's been a part of Japanese funerals for centuries. And it's during the last few minutes of an otherwise traditional Buddhist ceremony. A ceremony in which the community of mourners have ancient and precise duties, and the tale of the life is told. This is the funeral of Mr. Osamu Fujii. He was an educator, a highly respected man, loved by his family. As his daughters take their last opportunity to see him, there is grief. And as the body starts into the tunnel towards that eternal laser light that initially seemed so bizarre, there is joy. If there's more to the laser funeral than meets the eye, is there also more to Willie Jr.'s drive-through window in Pensacola? Oh my God. Yes, much more. The woman in the window was Marguerite Jackson McLean. This is her funeral, and I've never seen a more communal, sorrowful, joyful event.
Thank you for permitting this sister to stay with us as long as you did. Take care of her family she left behind. Thank you, our Father, that she made preparation for another home. But we're so glad and we're so thankful that we have another home. For one day, these old bodies must go back to the mother dust. But our soul is coming home to thee.
She walked with God, and she was not. Hallelujah, that last night, she walked with God. I can imagine in my own mind. God said, come on, Marguerite. Come on, go home with me. Come on, Marguerite. Go home with me tonight. Tired of you suffering. Tired of you having pain. Tired of you being misunderstood. Come on, go home with me. I'm like you. I hate to give up. Amen. We just hate to give up. Amen. Hallelujah, but we got to give up. Amen. All we can do now is make preparation to meet her, because we have to give her up.
And so Marguerite McLean went to her final reward. Reverend Eddie May Lane said it. We had to give her up and let her go. But we did it in a way that honored her life and her faith. In Arthur Miller's play, Death of a Salesman, Linda Lohman says of her husband, Willie, attention must finally be paid to such a man. He is not to be allowed to fall into his grave like an old dog. Attention must be paid. And that's what we do. We pay attention by remembering the nameless, by seeing the body one last time, not quite dead, by telling the tale of the life and keeping the memory alive, by involving the community and giving them tasks to perform, and by grief because we have to let her go, and joy because of who she was and where she's going. We pay attention to our dead in many ways, even when they're strangers. It's one of the nicest things about human beings, and it's what was wrong with my funeral. The only one paying any attention was me. And when the established rituals aren't enough, or have been forgotten, or rendered meaningless, when grief still overpowers, or for some reason attention cannot be paid in full, we find other ways, ways we think are new, but that often have their roots in all that we've learned.
Hi, I'm Rita. I've lost my husband in June of '89 after a 4.5-year battle with cancer. It was tough.
Grief therapy sessions like this one have become places where people can tell the tales of their husbands, wives, lovers, and children.
It takes a lot of courage to keep going.
Yeah. I've thought about doing the other thing as well. Even to the point of, God, this is tough. Even getting in the car and driving down the freeway and picking the bridge I was going to drive the car into. It hurt that bad.
Together, these people find a way to cope with their grief and a chance of crying and laughing.
This last weekend, I cleaned out my garage. And when I started cleaning out the clothes, I found packages of clothes, like underwear and stuff that he had bought that he had never worn. And so I took it back to the store. Then I got myself a pair of shoes. This is great stuff.
More than anything else, therapy groups offer a chance to be with people who know what you're going through. Some people prefer to cope with grief and loss alone. This is the story of someone like that. But more than anything else, this is a love story. Joe Cannon lives alone now by a lake in central Florida. His neighbors think he's just another elderly widower who himself, and they're right.
I really don't care how much longer I live, because without Terry here, I'm through with my working years.
Terry was Joe's wife, a tall, feisty girl from Wisconsin. They didn't have any children. They didn't have many friends. All they had was each other.
You aren't going to believe this, but I think I had the most perfect wife any man ever had. We were married 39 years, and this you won't believe, but we never had an argument, not a one. Now, differences of opinion.
That
yes.
one I don't believe.
Well, all right, it's the absolute truth.
Terry died of cancer 5 years ago. The moment after she was declared dead, she was attached to a heart-lung machine, packed in dry ice, and shipped to the Alcor Foundation in California, where her head was cryonically frozen. Cryonic freezing, first of Terry and eventually of Joe, will allow the Cannons at least a chance to be together again, to be the first couple ever to overcome till death us do part.
If Terry weren't frozen, I don't know that I would care to go ahead with this. But what makes me anxious for it to succeed, and I do what I can, is that someday I hope to continue on that wonderful marriage with her. And that is the only thing that pushes me forward now. Now this is a alarm device which is monitored in Massachusetts, and in about a minute and a half they will call back, and if I don't answer, then they have the emergency medical team, the hospital, call about 4 or 5 numbers.
Joe takes a chance living alone. After he dies, if his body isn't found in time, all his preparations will be for nothing. But Joe can't bring himself to leave the house he shared with Terry, so he's taken electronic precautions. And he's also prepared for the possibility that she will come back without him. Joe's put money in the bank for Terry when she returns and recorded a videotape telling her who she is, who he was, what their life was like together. He's done one more thing to keep her spirit alive within him. When Terry's cremated remains came back from California, Joe put the dust into capsules.
And then after I had that done, why, I started imbibing one with each meal.
Except for 3, which he puts under her pillow each night.
Part of her is still sleeping, and part of her is walking around with me every time I take a step, and part of her is cryonically suspended, waiting for, hopefully, for the day when she'll be alive and able to continue her life. And I hope with me there to enjoy it with her.
In one way, Joe Cannon is lucky. He's chosen to deal with his grief by not getting rid of Terry's body. But he had the choice. Some people have no body to keep or dispatch.
In our moments of failure, empower us with the strength to try again.
In Linthicum, Maryland, a minister speaks of hope in the face of death.
Victory, we read, "The Lord will swallow up death forever."
In the congregation is the Shea family, Dr. and Mrs. Shea, their daughter Mary Rutledge, her husband and sons, Macon and Don. They know something about hope because of the family member who is not here, Donald Shea, Jr. He was an Air Force navigator in Vietnam, shot down in 1970. No trace of Donald Shea has ever been found.
He was a good son, an amiable young man who did well and didn't give us any problems. He had had a sense of humor, was good looking, and a lot of friends. I really, if I keep talking, it would sound like he was a perfect person. He wasn't, but he was certainly a good son, and we miss him.
Sarah Shea has waited a long time for her son to come back, one way or another. In vain. Her calmness when she talks about him is deceiving. She's angry and defiant, and she has the flag flying back home to prove it.
According to the rules of treating the flag, flying it, that's what you're supposed to follow. You're not supposed to leave it up unless there's a light shining on it. I'm not going to take it down until they come up with some kind of information on my son. It's going to fly day and night, and I dare anybody to say anything to me about it. There it stays. It's my flag, my country.
Sarah Shea transferred her frustration and grief at not knowing what happened to her son, literally at not having a body, into action. She demanded that the military find out what happened and then tell her the truth. She went to Thailand and Laos. She hounded officials who told her Donald was dead because he must be dead.
So it helped a lot of ways for us to be able to get involved in this. And it so helped the country.
What is all this?
This guy's repelling, and this guy's skydiving, and this guy's just hanging.
The Shays are as all-American a family as you could hope to find. Proud grandparents, regular kids, strong people. It would be wrong to say what they've been through dominates their lives. They continue, but they do not, cannot forget.
I've never felt any guilt about not grieving anymore, because I'll grieve till I die. The only good thing I can think about it is that I hope it doesn't happen to anybody else.
At the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., the community comes to pay attention to the dead and the missing. The wall is unique, a war memorial that does what funeral rituals should do, all by itself. Through a simple chronological listing of the names, it tells the tale. It gives mourners something to do, to come here, to see, and touch, and be together. And the wall provides an opportunity, place, for sorrow and joy. Today the Shays have come to visit the wall. Macon has never been here before, never seen his uncle's name and the special mark next to it that Sarah Shea demanded, a mark that means missing, not dead.
Was William Ott his pilot?
Where's that?
William Ott was the pilot for the plane, and Don was the navigator.
I'm glad it's here. I think it's an honor to the men that were over there.
What happened?
Macon Rutledge was born years after his uncle disappeared. He never knew him. But on this day, in this place, an invisible hand touched his heart. For the Shays, it was another moment of healing, another step forward for the living. Donald Shea Jr. is not dead. He lives on through these people and the attention they will always give him. And death shall have no dominion.
Funding for this program was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you.
This is PBS.